Pure and simple. You're watching the Fox Business Network. Here again are Liz Clayman and Cheryl Casoni.
Well, the clock is winding down for the largest tax hike ever, and the debate over what to do with Bush tax cuts heats up in Washington. Here's what U.S. Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner had to say about it.
We also think it's responsible to let the tax cuts expire that just go to 2 to 3% of Americans, the highest earning Americans. Just letting those tax cuts that only go to 2 to 3% of Americans, the highest earning Americans in the country, expire, I do not believe will have a negative effect on growth.
So, what's at stake for the American taxpayer? Let's ask our next guest in Washington, D.C., Walter Nagel, tax partner at the international law firm Reed Smith. And joining us here in our studio is Alan DeLugish, partner at Marks, Paneth & Schron. Welcome to both of you. And Walter, I want to start with you because the question here within the debate between those that believe they shouldn't expire and those that believe that they should not expire is that we will go into a double-dip recession if we do not extend these Bush tax cuts. How do you refute that?
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case. This is not a question of a full loaf or half a loaf here. I mean, what can happen is there are parts of the Bush tax cut that can easily be allowed to expire, and parts of those cuts can be extended. And as the Secretary has said, they're only looking at really the tax rates on the top 2 or 3% of Americans here.
Alan, what's wrong with looking at that? I mean, the people who do have the money, then perhaps go to them for this expiration, at least, of that, instead of hitting the middle and lower classes.
Well, the problem is that it may be 2%, maybe 2% of the taxpayers, but it's a much higher percentage, something more like 60 to 70% of the taxes that are being paid. Those taxes are going directly into investment into the economy in a very large percentage. It's very difficult for me to understand people like Geithner and Christina Romer who should know better. Economics 1A says that the best way to stimulate the economy is to make investment. Consumption is a distant second. The investment all is coming from the people who are going to be taxed if this tax cut goes into effect. And there's a three-part effect of this tax increase that's going to happen. The first is any investment opportunity is going to be much less profitable. So people aren't going to they're not going to hire the people to do the investment. Plus the perception of the future investments with taxes and more regulations going down the road, it's pushing all of these companies to go abroad.
Well, but Walter, here's my question. When it comes to small businesses, right, what about the small businesses out in this country that file as LLCs each and every year? The administration wants these folks to hire, but can they do that if they're looking at a bigger tax burden next year?
Oh, I'm not sure they'll be looking at a bigger tax burden. There is no question that we also have competing with low taxes. We've got this massive budget deficit, and we need to do something to address the massive deficit. So what we're looking at here is a balancing act. You've got to balance the tax rates and the tax cuts with the deficits that are going on in the country.
But I'm asking you about small business, Walter. You're not really answering my question. I'm asking you about smaller businesses in this country that file as LLCs that have average annual income of above $250,000.
I don't think that a small bump up in their rates is going to foreclose them from hiring. What's going to foreclose them from hiring is not having access to the capital markets because the deficits are out of control. That's what's going to foreclose them from hiring.
That is absolutely not true. Businesses make their decisions based upon their tax rates, and they don't have the money. If they're taxed an extra $500,000 in taxes, that's $500,000 that will not be going into hiring new people. It's just that simple. Not only is the future much more bleak, making them not want to invest more money in the future, but there is less current money available to invest. How anybody could view that differently is beyond me. And the spending has got to be cut.
Let me jump in here. The time for a tax cut, perhaps in hindsight, was not during boom years, which is what we ended up getting. So now we run a $1 trillion war, not to mention everything's more expensive from Medicare to Social Security. At what point do you pay to make this country run?
The problem is what you said. The tax cuts during the Bush era raised revenue hugely. That revenue was spent.
And the deficits.
Only because of spending. If you look at the revenue, you would see those tax cuts increased revenue far beyond anything that Washington ever believed it would be. But incredibly, Congress was able to spend it all and then some. That's exactly what happened. That's why to tell a businessman now you should raise taxes when he paid so much more in taxes when the tax cut came because of the booming economy, and now you're saying that he should pay a higher rate of tax, well, now it's going to contract.
Walter?
You know, the Tax Foundation did a study that on families that are making $300,000 a year, they expect to see their tax rates go up by less than $4,000. I mean, that's the amount of money we're talking about. $4,000 is a lot of money to middle-class folks, but $4,000 is not that much money when you're making $300,000, $500,000. That's what we're arguing about.
Not true. That's very selective. You're looking at 300,000, which is just above the 250 cutoff. But what about these good-sized businesses that don't pay corporate taxes but pay personal tax rates, making a couple of $1 million a year? The dollars are huge, and taking amounts out of context because it fits your conclusion is not something that helps the debate.
Walter, it goes back to the small business. That's the issue I was bringing up earlier with you. Unless you want to change the tax code. I mean, maybe they can do that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it depends on how you define a small business, and if you're looking at a small business that's making $300,000, I mean, I just told you what the effect would be. It isn't that large.
On a family, not a business, though. It's different.
Right. We're just talking at one piece of the puzzle. We haven't talked about capital gains. We haven't talked about the dividends or the estate tax.
Well, we'll have you back
this
to
is
talk
gonna
about
be
all of that and so much more.
Thanks.
Our time is out, but we
Thanks.
appreciate you
Okay.
both being here. Alan, Walter, good discussion. Thank you so much, both of you.
Great, thank you.
Anytime.
All right.